Ark Survival Ascended's Scorched Earth. It's a land that's as beautiful as it is harsh and violent. I've always considered it one of the lesser DLCs, but this is pretty unfair because I've never actually given it a fair shot. But now that it's free on Ark Survival Ascended, I think it's finally time to jump in and 100% the map, doing everything it has to offer. This means taming every single creature, as well as defeating the Alpha Manticore. And as usual for the series, we're doing it on hardcore mode. So let's get started. Spawning in, I just completed Aberration, which meant I was super excited for the change of pace and actually be outside in the sun, opposed to in a dark dungeon. That same sun though would be my worst enemy as it'd be super dangerous, so I immediately got to work punching trees and making up my first tools and armor. If you could call this armor. I then punched a cactus, which added cactus to my resume of trees and mushrooms, but I did this because I would need the cactus sap in order to survive the harsh heat. I was then given a not so warm welcome to the Scorched Earth map by a rock elemental who decided to spawn and almost immediately obliterated me throwing a rock my way. He was extremely slow though, so I was able to get away just by running. Seriously though, we were about a foot away from ending it before we even got started. I was then able to find a small river and provide me with some water. And then what I did next, I did out of pure desperation, and I am extremely not proud of. I'm sorry. But this allowed me to finish the rest of my matching PJ set, as well as craft a mortar and pestle before we placed down our first base. I then found another jerboa that I found cute, so I, let's call it introduced myself, but it seemed to have a submissive kink because it actually liked this and became my friend. And Birdie was always tweaking, but I never actually took the time to figure out what each emote meant weather event, so I just kind of let him do his thing. I then made some boomerangs and then immediately put them to use, just continuing to terrorize all my nearby neighbors, and tamed up this Morellatops we named Mordecai. This actually took like a lot of chasing it around, but it was really boring, so I was then forced to do some more things that I would rather not have. But in the end it was worth it because I got a Morellatops saddle. Mordecai was then able to get us access to some raw meat via rivaling Morellatops gang, which we spoiled while farming narco berries in order to craft us up a bunch of narcotic. We then packed up on Mordecai and set out to find a more active base spot. Eventually we found one more downriver and set up another little starter base. Although I wasn't a huge fan of our neighbors because I swear this Rex was just staring at us. And my suspicions were correct because eventually he came over and told us he was legally required to tell us he was a sex offender. So we immediately packed up, escaped, and got out of there. But we'd followed the river for so long, we ended up doing full circle and coming right back to our first starter base. So I decided to call it good there and be a little more grateful this time. I wasn't the only one who discovered the spot though, as there was a low-level Anki nearby, so I decided to boomerang him until he was unconscious, and then give him a little bit of food to make up for it, and somehow that convinced him to like me. During this process though, we got attacked by pagos, so I took the opportunity and we went ahead and tamed one up. This also earned our fourth tame the name Pago Hater. Mordecai and I then set out to this hill little cliff thing next to our base in order to search for some metal. But after getting attacked by a pack of raptors and just having no luck, we cut it short and decided to head home. Back near my base though, Mordecai found a little bowling ball on the ground, so he was curious and started beating it up. But then it turned out it had a baby, so we claimed a little bit of a smaller bowling ball. After this though, I was back on the search for metal, so we head up towards the plateau near Greenob, and we were able to find one singular node up near the cliffy plateau. There was then an intense, thrilling, exciting walk home encumbered in a sandstorm. That was brilliant. But eventually we placed down a forge and got the metal smelting. And before not long, we also had a smithy where we crafted up all metal tools and a crossbow. And I crafted up a hatchet like an idiot, because if you're observant, you'd have noticed I already had one. I got it from a raptor, by the way. I was then able to utilize our new crossbow as well as Mordecai's pretty high health pool and tame ourselves a thorny dragon from the back of Mordecai. They're so dramatic. I kind of like it. And as I was taming him, I kind of realized that I was too harsh on Scorched Earth. Like, the map is pretty dang beautiful. I also tamed a level 5 Parasaur just so I wouldn't have to later, because I have to tame everything. But then I did also end up needing to tame another one later because first super specific tame, but anyways, yeah, this happened. Then after farming fiber, farming cactus, and crafting up a bunch of clay, we were then able to go ahead and saddle up all 3 of our new farmers. I then immediately put them into the workforce, made them wish I never made a saddle, but it's at this point that I want to mention that there could be a 100-hour long video if I kept in all the farming, so I am going to cut it out because there's hours and hours of footage of me farming. But rest assured, I'm still wasting the prime of my life farming on a dinosaur game, and yeah, let's continue before I think about it too much. But my work was interrupted when I saw this red drop with a ring around it, and then I was crushed, just absolutely devastated because I forgot that there was a level requirement, and I really wasn't even close. So, upon returning home though, I figured the next step to progression would be an RG, so I went ahead and crafted an Argentavis trap. And I was then attacked by a 135 Sabertooth, which was exactly what I needed because I was looking for something to take me over to actually tame the RG with. Then after kidnapping and murdering a baby Morellatops, we were able to tame up Gloria, who was going to be really helpful to us. Me and Gloria immediately set off towards the mountain in the middle of the map to try and find ourselves an Argentavis. Once we were there, we parkoured up to the top of a little peak where an Argentavis would be safe knocked out before setting down our trap. Once the trap was placed, we peeked over the edge of the cliff and shot the very first RG we see and got its attention. And as it flew up, we went inside of our trap and it seamlessly flew in and immediately trapped. And when we turned around, it was a 145. And as you can see here, I was pretty shocked. So I immediately started tranking it out to secure the tame. And as I'm knocking it out, I got something to say. So if you didn't know, RGs can now spawn with babies. But in the very first ASA trailer, there's an RG with a baby, and it took them over a year to actually be able to implement that. Maybe even 2, I'm not even sure. But does anybody else find it weird that they did this? Why? Why show the baby if you can't actually have an RG baby until now? Was this a mistake? Did they plan on adding this, like, way back then? I don't know. Anyways, I'm done with that tangent. I then went back down there and killed a thorny dragon baby that was a level 135. Like, what is with Scorched Earth in these levels? This is actually insane. Is this not a story map? I don't know. Scorched Earth is impressing me here. Also, check out this parkour. It's like a budget Thyla at this point. And before not long, we had a really good RG in our hands. Even though I'm technically not even high enough level for the saddle, but that means we just gotta kill some things back at home. And holy cow, do Sabertooths get good kiting. I got 337 from one scorpion. And on the way home, I was just high enough level to get this yellow drop with a ring around it, and I got so many metal structures to destroy for really good polymer, paste, and metal. I was then running around killing a bunch of things for levels, and we found a 135 Anki, which we killed. Like, Scorched levels are absolutely blowing me out of the water. Ironic, there's no water on the map. Alright, I'm done with that. I shouldn't even keep this in. Anyways, about an hour later, we were high enough level and we were finally able to take to the skies with our RG. And we used this opportunity to go and get ourselves some crystal before just absolutely violating this bug repeatedly, just like taking the juices out of him. I don't know. But I got so carried away that I actually almost died to the heat on the way home. But after cooling down and healing up, we took everything we gathered and brought it to the obelisk to make cryopods because I wanted to pack up all the creatures in our whole base into the RG and find a better place to live. And so that's exactly what we did. As you can see here, my RG is holding literally everything in my base as well as all my creatures. So we set out with them to go and find a spot. And I eventually settled on this little, like, I don't know, little dig out area with these 3 peaks on top because it's really easy to recognize. It looks kind of cool and I could put some walls around and defend the area. It's also right next to Red Ob and as well as the Wyvern Trench and is, you know, simultaneously kind of central. So it was a good location. That means for the 3rd time in this playthrough, I set up a little starter shack. And then I had to take multiple trips to and from my old base because I had a whole lot of metal and stuff. I then broke one singular rock and one singular tree, and then boom, just like that, we had our walls completely built up and our base completely defended. Also, that was obviously a joke. This took so much farming. I also saw an actual orphan baby kangaroo, so I chased it around and tamed it, but unfortunately it immediately died to a terror bird. But after this, I slightly expanded my base. This way I could fit like a fabricator or anything else I needed in there. Speaking of, I then stole this bug's inside and used them to place down our own fabricator. And then there was this little guy running around my base, so I knocked him out and then fed him some of my chitin, and we had our little Archaeopteryx. I then gathered some silk the eco-friendly way, and turned it into desert cloth so I could finally go into the hotter parts of the map safely. I then set off back near the green ob to find one of the best tames in the whole game, let alone Scorched Earth, that being the Thylacoleo. And this took a lot of Thylas in a very hefty amount of time, but eventually I was able to find a 140 and scoop them up. I mean, I had 38 Thyla claws at this point, I was searching. And when I finally brought him home and put him in the trap, my RG was, had seen better days. But I was quickly able to discipline him for what he did to my RG by pumping a bajillion trank arrows right into his cranium. I then sacrificed a baby Lystro that was actually level 150. Once again, Scorched levels are being weird. And then I cooked it all up, because if you didn't know, Thylacoleos actually prefer cooked meat over raw. And after a long night of cooking, we finally had a Thylacoleo who we named Campfire Stories. And when I checked his stats, I was blown away as he has 49 melee, which is just absolutely insane. The health stat was a little bit lacking, but we could just get a better one on a female, but the 49 melee is crazy. And so back at the area I just looked, I found a 110 female Thyla, which was, going to be good enough for me, because we just needed a slightly better than 29 health. And lucky enough, she came out with 35 health, which was in fact an upgrade, so we went ahead and bred them together to get a perfect baby. And it took a couple prototypes before we got it right. And by the time the perfect Thyla was born, we had a raging heat stroke, and I named it Sherman because that's my dog's name. And before you yell at me like, oh my gosh, no, they're cats, don't name it after a dog, they're actually not. They weren't feline. Fun fact, they're actually closer related to marsupials, which is like koala bears. But the reason they have these cat-like features is because of convergent evolution, which is where two species that are completely different evolve the similar traits. So they're not cats. But they're also not dogs, so I guess my logic doesn't really make a lot of sense. But I don't have a pet koala, so let's continue. I then imprinted on Sherman, who's going to be super helpful throughout the entire run, is going to be by my side throughout the entire playthrough. And all the health I've been losing and heat stroke I've been getting made me realize that stone base is probably not the play, so I moved it all into adobe. After this, I headed to the Wyvern trench with Sherman, tossed him out, but as I was in the trench, there weren't a lot of wyverns. There was a couple I had to deal with, but I just couldn't find any eggs in any of the things. So getting pretty low, I climbed on out of there and decided to take the L and head home. A couple days later though, we were back at it, and after a couple bad level eggs as well as having to deal with a couple pesky wyverns, it finally happened. We climbed up and we found a lightning egg, which is what we wanted for the boss fight, and then it turned out to be a little 190, which is just the best of both worlds, what the best we could ask for. But we immediately got jumped by a bunch of wyverns, and because there were a couple poisons and I was kind of almost at half health, I decided to just skedaddle on out of there. And if you didn't know, if you just spam the jump button with Thylas, they can get up to pretty insane speeds, so I was able to escape this little pack. But as I was trying to climb out of there, another group found me, and they were really just trying to prevent me from escaping. I was able to get out of there though, and I was looking super low on health due to poison wyverns and the heat, obviously. But I was able to find literally the smallest spot where I wasn't dying of heat. It was actually insane. As you can see, where I'm standing right now, I am not dying of heat. But as you can see, I was pushed like half of a centimeter, and I was immediately dying of heat. It was literally one tiny little rock I could stand on where I wasn't dying. So that was absolutely insane and literally saved the run as I was on the brink of death. So after staying there for a while, I got back on the RG and I was able to fly home. but I couldn't hatch up the eggs yet. And I needed silico pearls to be able to hatch them, so I'm headed over to Red Ob, where they were just all over the place. Usually they're really annoying to get on maps, but here they were just extremely abundant. And back at home, I smelted together oil and hide to make some gasoline before heading out to farm up a bunch of obsidian. I then crafted up a whole lot of paste as well as a bunch of electronics. And then after this, I made so much polymer, and this took absolute ages. I was just sitting there playing Clash Royale the whole time. Just reached the highest arena though, so I guess that was good. I then spent all these resources on a windmill and finally an egg incubator, where I immediately hatched the egg as well as claimed it and named him Pinky. Pinky had solid stats and was a vampiric, and if you watch my island episode, you know that is overpowered. So me and Pinky went on a walk and got 50% imprint, but I wanted Wyvern milk, so they had to go back into the Pokeball before I made a bunch of behemoth gates to make an RG trap, but Wyvern edition. But I'm an idiot and realized that in ASA, they don't have tops, so this literally just won't work and is a waste of a whole lot of resources. And I was pretty disappointed in myself. Despite this though, I just kind of hopped on our boy Sherman and shot the Wyvern from his back, and this actually worked like super well as they just kind of flew in circles around me, biting me, and eventually I was able to knock out a low-level poison Wyvern. But my stupidity did not end here, as I literally knocked out a male. So I don't know what kind of Wyvern milk I was looking for, but it's not the right one. So yeah, I don't know how I actually like beat these games with my brain. And then looking for a female Wyvern, I actually found an alpha fire Wyvern, which was only level 25. But then I got back on track and knocked out a lightning Wyvern that this time was a female. I was confident in Sherman, so I then got the Alpha Fire Wyvern's attention and took the same approach as when I was knocking them out. It would fly around in circles, but whenever it would get close, I would just jump up and bite it. Due to his super high melee stat as well as his bleed ability, this fight was kind of a cakewalk, and I was able to take out the Alpha Fire Wyvern. But killing an alpha gives you so much milk, so I didn't even need to do any of the trap or knockout stuff. I don't know, this was a whole mess. But anyways, I was able to get home and finish the imprint on Pinky, giving us our first Wyvern in so long. I then spent, way too much time just kind of playing around because it's been a while since I've had a Wyvern. But while I was messing around, I accidentally killed this wolf's parents, so I decided to claim him. And I then hopped on this zebra that took absolutely ages to tame with measure berries, and actually only finished up on the very last one. And all this writing gave me some pretty serious heat stroke, so I had to AFK in my room. There was a lot of AFKing in my house in this playthrough. I then hatched up a low-level lightning wyvern, which was a male because mine was a female, and this meant I could combine the two and make a bunch to start breeding for mutations. And so I got just a couple set up, and I'll add more once I get a mutation and then split it into 2 lines, but this will be going in the background of the entire rest of the video, so rest assured it's happening. I then crafted my very first canteen in my career, which is funny because I feel like I always get these things out of drops until I actually need one. And it was then time to take on my very first cave, so I kind of just ran in, threw out my thyla, and wrote him in. And there really weren't too many huge groups to deal with. There's a couple small little spider crews, but other than that, I was really only scared of the bats. Because if I got rabies, I didn't have any lesser cures to heal myself, and they give you AIDS for like a whole 70 seconds, so. And there was one more little part that my thyla didn't fit through, so I did kind of just wait by him, but for the cryo timer to go down, and then cryopod him and rethrow him out on the other end. And from here, all I had to do was jump down, and I was pretty much already at the artifact. And while I was picking up literally the one thing I didn't want to happen, I got attacked by a bat. Luckily though, I did not get rabies, so that was just dumb luck. And I do like how Scorched Earth gives you a skin along with all the artifacts. That's just kind of a cool little thing they did. And returning home, my house was literally encased in fog. Like, it looked like the mist. So, I don't know, that's just kind of creepy. And I now had a bunch of organic polymer from the mantis in the cave, so I took the opportunity to make a bunch of electronic, just playing more Clash Royale really, it was pretty boring. But then after that, I turned the polymer, the electronics, and all the other resources into a bunch of auto turrets. I then set out on the back of Sherman to tame ourselves a level 85 Paraceratherium. And it took quite a while, but I was never in really any danger, but it did end up knocking out after I'd used my very last arrow, so I almost had to resort to just trying to punch it. I then brought him home and named him Tanker before using the rest of our pearls to make a Parasaur platform saddle. Holy tongue twister. Say pearls platform saddle. Pearls Parasaur platform saddle. I then made a little adobe shack on his back and then added all of the turrets we just made onto the top, making him, well, a tanker, like the name suggests. Also note, you can't do this on PvP, you can only do this on single player settings, but I'm not playing PvP, so I don't know why I even felt the need to mention that. I had lots of charcoal, but I was going to need tons, so I started smelting all my wood for passive income. Sherman and I then head out to the second cave. I had to actually get pretty deep into the cave before there were groups of enemies, but these were the biggest groups I'd seen in a cave so far, although they were nothing that Sherman couldn't handle. I mean, he's a Thyla. Much like the last cave though, there were still bats, so whenever they were around, I made sure to jump up and try to kill them first before they can inflict me with their aids. This cave also had one of the scariest parts of the run because it's literally just an insta-death drop, and we're on hardcore mode, so it would literally just all end because I'm not good at parkour. After just a couple more groups though, we were at the artifact, and all in all, I actually kind of liked this cave. It was pretty cool, not too difficult though, so yeah. There were arthropleura that broke my armor and I would die of the heat, so this was the first time in my life that I'd ever crafted cloth armor while holding an artifact, so that was kind of interesting. Going forward, we were going to need a lot of gunpowder, so I made some spark powder as well as cementing paste before crafting a chem bench. I then visited the third and final artifact cave, in which I believed to be the hardest, but I literally just ran through. I don't know if this was like a glitch, but I mean, there were some creatures, but I just kind of ran through everything until I got to the artifact room. There was one little group I had to kill, but yeah. Speaking of the artifact room, not only was it extremely beautiful, but it also didn't have an artifact until I was in there for like a couple seconds, and then it just kind of popped out of nowhere. But yeah, cool looking room. I then made a whole lot of gunpowder in the chemistry bench and then turned that into a whole lot of ammo. It was in a sandstorm, so I went out and scooped up a terror bird and brought it home to tame it, just because I had to eventually. I then loaded over 700 bullets onto the back of Tanker, about 100 for each, before taking him on a road trip all the way to the Wyvern Trench. Once there, I hopped right onto the back of Pinky before going and getting the attention of other wyverns. I would then lead them over to Tanker and he would absolutely annihilate them with the turrets on his back. I mean, I brought some pretty hefty groups over to the Tanker and he did not struggle at all. These turrets were just absolutely wiping floor with these wyverns. I would then scavenge through the armies of dead wyverns on the ground, just kind of picking apart their claws. I mean, just take a look at how efficient this murdering machine was. The method worked so well that while I was there, I actually decided to go ahead and get a 140 fire wyvern egg, and then Tanker took care of those who tried to stop me. And eventually, when we only needed one more talent, I decided to just go ahead and fight it out with my own wyvern. And it actually ended up being closer than I would have liked because it was a pretty high level wyvern that we were fighting, but eventually Pinky was able to come through and get us our final talon. We then actually just left Tanker there, but I think he'll be alright. And as we put the talons away, this meant that we'd had every single thing that we needed for this boss fight. And then over at the incubator, I had a huge brain fart as I had it set to destroy any egg that didn't have a mutation into health or melee, because like I said, I was breeding in the background. But then I put our 140 fire egg in there and obviously didn't have a mutation, which this really sucked because I was going to need that too for a later tame. So this, as you can see later, this will come back and bite us in the butt pretty hard. Anyways though, I then trapped a bug before shooting it in the face, and then after that I decided to recruit it to my team. And then on the way home I did scoop up a Daedon in order to tame them as well. But it wasn't just the Daedon, as I then tamed a Vulture, a Microraptor, a Scorpion, a Hyenodon, a Capro, as well as a Carnotaurus. And the taming wasn't over there because next I had to go ahead and scoop ourselves up a Kentro, and a lot of this playthrough was actually just kind of flying around the map picking things up. but it makes up for it because the landscapes were always absolutely gorgeous. I was then going to need crops, so I placed down some crop pots as well as planted them, and then I watched them all get thrown up on, which at first I thought was really gross, but then I kind of thought about it and like, we fertilize it with poop, so like, is it really that gross? I then went and knocked out another fat camel so that way we could maximize our puke efficiency, and while he was taming I went up and got ourselves a lystro. I then deposited the aforementioned poop into all the crop plots, and I'm on pretty crazy farming rates because I don't want to sit here and wait for crops to grow. That's like super stupid, but it should still take only a couple of hours. So in the meantime, I crafted up a ghillie suit and then sat around for a couple of hours. But then after, you guessed it, a couple of hours, I was able to make a bunch of bug repellent, which was going to be needed for the next couple tames. Firstly, I tamed a dung beetle, which doesn't need the bug repellent, by the way, just want to clarify that. After that, I quickly smited a death worm with my lightning breath. And then I used its horn as well as bug repellent to tame our first mantis, who was immediately tested against another mammoth who attacked him. I then tamed a giant centipede, and if all the dinosaurs from Ark went unextinct, I honestly think this one might be my least favorite. Back in the caves, we went ahead and tamed ourselves a spider, as well as a bat who was just kind of eating a stone wall. And on the way out of the cave, we got the most insane yellow drop I've ever seen, just absolutely game-changing. And now that the bug repellent section of the taming was done, I had to kind of sit there and watch wyverns get it on because we need a couple tames coming up that needed either eggs or babies to complete. And after this, as I set out, the most ironic death ever happened. Our Ankylosaurus Pego hater, we named at the very start, died to a Pego in our own base. Like, this dude through and through was a Pego hater, and then it actually ended up ending him, so that was just kind of crazy. Anyways, on the way to the desert, I bola sniped this Tapahara before turning an RG into prime meat and taming it. And people like to say Titanoboa is an annoying tame, but they don't attack wyverns, so if you find a group of them, you can just kind of throw out the eggs and sit right next to them. Eventually they'll eat them and be tamed up. I then trapped and carefully knocked out a galley because these guys have super high torpor for their super low health, and then tamed them up in the sandstorm. And I also didn't realize that you can like see a sandstorm rolling over the hills, which is like actually super cool. I then absolutely dunked this Megatherium from the free throw line into my trap before taming him up as well. I then had a little brawl with this Yudi because I have 800 health and it was a super low level. And so I just decided to kind of get in there and shoot it raw dog it style. But then eventually it ran away and it turned this corner and just absolutely vanished. I don't know what it was doing. It was absolutely magic, but it just disappeared. But it turns out that it just passed out and I didn't see it because it was laying down and I was looking for a giant running furry T-Rex. I then head to the Oasis Cave where I actually almost drowned on the way in. That would have just been a really dumb way to end the playthrough, but we did make it. And this is essentially just a cave where they spawn everything that shouldn't be on Scorched Island and just hide it away because I came down here because I needed a Deinosuchus and an electric eel, which just should not be on this map. Eventually though, the big old gator got stuck between two little, I don't know, the two ends of the river, and I was able to feed him a couple times and get it tamed up. And then quickly before leaving, we tamed an eel, so thank you to Dododex because I didn't know they were either on this map or that you could tame them with prime meat, so shout out Dododex. I then needed to tame a giant bee, so I made C4 as well as grappling hooks. But then when I actually did the research, I found out that I had super over-prepared because on Scorched Earth, they just kind of spawn flying around, so yeah. I figured I could use my C4 for something though, so I found a Facilo, and I very, very slowly crawled up to it to plant the C4, and then very, very slowly crawled away before blowing it up and hopping on. While I was mounted though, I got little to no torpor buildup, and eventually I got dismounted due to like some little cliff thing, so I had to head home and take the L on this one. Once I got home though, I just kind of crafted a couple grenades and returned right back. Once I returned, I threw some grenades at his mound before blowing him out of the ground and hopping right back on. Just like last time though, these normal rocks were giving me very, very little torpor buildup. There were two metal nodes though, which gave me very good torpor buildup and made pretty much the majority of what we had done in just those two rocks. And after a couple more minutes of bull riding, we got about above halfway, but I got dismounted again. And it took like 7 minutes for him to burrow again, but eventually he did, and we hopped right back on at just about half torpidity. Again though, we got it to just above half torpidity before getting dismounted again, this time by just a tree. And this meant we were on our last grenade because I only brought 3 because it was so much easier on Aberration when there was all these rare minerals on the surface. This time though, after barreling through everything on the way, I was able to find some salt rocks, which the torpidity bar liked a lot more than normal rocks. And so it only took 2 little groups, but eventually, after barreling into all the salt that we could find, we were able to get him down and knocked out. Finally. This took like 15 minutes. And it also took us a couple thousand meters away from our Wyvern, so we had to pull out Sherman to get there. And if you want a piece of advice for hardcore, always have a powerful flyer around and always have a powerful mount in your pocket. Like if you look at my playthrough on the island, I always had a Baryonyx and my Rhino. Here I always have my Wyvern and my Thyla. These is like the 2 keys to keeping you alive on hardcore, because one bad thing slips up and your whole run is over. I then had to head back into the Wyvern trench because I still needed a good fire egg, which this wouldn't have happened if I wasn't an absolute idiot and got that 140 broken. Anyways, yeah, I need a fire egg, and that's what I did for the next day. I was able to find a ton of eggs, but nothing just seemed to be high enough level, like, at all. And then eventually I had a super close call as I looked around, hopped off, and there was a fire wyvern right behind me. I was able to get back on my wyvern in time though, but my health got extremely low due to getting a little bit of fire breath on me. After this though, it was back to business as usual. My health was slowly going down though due to the heat, so I had to get out of there soon. But then I turned this corner and was met with the frickin' Avengers whole squad, just an absolute army of wyverns coming at me. So it was a super close call. As you can see, my wyvern's health began becoming super low, but luckily Tanker was right there to save me. But unfortunately he couldn't save himself, as he must have run out of ammo from being over here so long. So yeah, he did take everyone's attention though and allowed me to escape with my life. So Tanker, thank you, you have saved the run. Looking at my wyvern's health and then my own, if he wasn't there, we absolutely would have died to maybe even one more breath of any wyvern. And then flying home, there was an alpha wyvern just right outside my base, like stuck in the ground though, so I don't know if we're unlucky that he's here or if we're lucky he's stuck, but yeah, that could have been really bad. We couldn't go take care of him yet though, as we had to wait about an hour inside just to get my health bar back. Sherman was able to make very quick work of this alpha though, like it wasn't even a threat. I was then farming for Cerato up in the mountains because I would need to tame one, and a Purlovia tried to interrupt me, so I got on my wyvern, scooped him up, and head home. I then dunked him as well, and I feel like with the wyvern, dropping things into a 2x2 was kind of difficult. Like, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I feel like I'm getting pretty good at this. I then sat inside stabbing myself with a needle to collect my own blood repeatedly until I was low health, and then healing up, and then doing it again. I then went to the Rex spot in order to find a Rex and just kind of started shooting it and then letting my wyvern tank the damage before it knocked out eventually. And then I named it River Monster because it was on a river. And on the way home I scooped up to go ahead and tame an iguanodon. Like I said, there was a lot of flying around, but I actually didn't hate it too much because like the map is pretty underrated in terms of looks. I also super quickly tamed up a little moss chops. And then I crafted up a super simple stone trap, as well as a bunch of hemoglobin cocktails to tame a Ceratosaurus. Also, did you know they're called hemogoblin and not globin? Like, I feel like it should be globin. Anyways, I placed down the trap and hopped on Sherman inside, and the Ceratosaurus followed me in pretty easily, so I fed him the hemoglobin, but it actually just didn't really work. Like, he was sitting there attacking me, and he'd get to like 6% drunk, and then nothing would happen, and then later it'd show 4% drunk again. So yeah, I decided that I was going to get rid of the trap and see if it worked outside the trap. So I got out of the trap and then picked it up, thus freeing the Ceratosaurus before turning around and running back to Mount Sherman. And I immediately noticed a difference as it was using more and different attacks and kind of different like combos, which made it get drunk way faster and it was attacking way faster. So I let it just kind of sit there and beat me up. I was never really worried about Sherman's health. He had like way more than he would need. But yeah, it just kind of beat me up, and now I could actually see the drunk meter going up as it's supposed to. And it beat me up all the way into the night, so it actually took quite a while. Eventually though, it got a purple aura of its own and stopped attacking me, so I figured that meant it was drunk, and I was correct. So I just kind of ran up to it with a piece of raw prime meat and fed it. And then after one more feed, it was all ours. I know with the higher levels, they can actually sober up and you have to re-drunk them, but this one did not need that. And it was back to the caves after this as I got the attention of a Megalania off the wall and then proceeded to shoot at it from the back of Sherman. And this was honestly like one of the most effective taming methods I've ever done, so. And then later on in the cave, I ran into a Megalania that was just chilling on the ground. Like, I didn't even know they could spawn there. And then I had to fly across the entire map to go ahead and find ourselves a Megalosaur, which we shot, and then hopped on the cliff, and then just shot him a couple times in the face from up top. But they also have super low torpor, so it made this pretty easy. We also knocked out and tamed a snail with a veggie cake, which is way too expensive. They're pretty much useless. And at this point in the run, I've usually have come across an Ovis by now to like claim one of their babies, but this time I just haven't, so I actually did have to fly around for quite a while to go ahead and find one. Eventually though, I was able to spot a measly little level 5 and kidnap them and bring them home. And one of the tames going forward is a raging alcoholic, so I had to place some beer barrels. And then I found River Monster Aura farming. Like, I don't know why he was sitting up there. Like, he's level 20. If he wasn't, he looked like he'd rule my whole base. Like, he looks like Batman. Anyways though, it was back to the Wyvern Trench as I still needed a good fire wyvern. Eventually though, my health had gotten super low, so I had to go home, and that meant more just laying in my house AFK to get my health back. There's just a lot of this. After that though, I slightly modified the trap. This way if we put a Troodon in there, it couldn't just run out before setting off to actually find a Troodon. I expected this to take absolutely ages, but it actually only took like 45 seconds as I found 2 of them just kind of tweaking, breakdancing over here on this cliff. I then got karma for bragging so much because I missed the trap like 4 times and had to switch to the RG because it was easier, so. But it was in there regardless, so I hatched a 115 poison wyvern, and then I waited till nighttime, threw it out, made sure it was cryo-sicked, and then this is the Beth method. I hopped in with a shield, and I just kind of stood around my cryopotted dino because every time it attacks me, it damages the dino, and when the dino does eventually die, it counts towards the taming. And I've never had it not, so. I then went and got more eggs, not even a single fire one even spawned at any level. So taking a break from the wyverns, I head out and find a family of Dinotherium, which I've honestly always hated as a creature. So I took the liberty of killing all of them but one. I then had a standoff with the sole survivor, and the only reason he didn't immediately trample me is because he smelled the faint smell of alcohol on me. Like, this dude's max prestige alcoholic. Even more than Chalicotherium. Eventually I got too close though, and he did not like that, so he did end up stomping me. But when I went to try to go for round 2, he actually just fell into a ravine. But he couldn't escape me as I found him at the bottom and did the exact same thing. But I'm still an idiot as I made the exact same mistake. Lucky for me though, he actually couldn't fit through here because he's fat. And on the 3rd standoff, I just didn't move and he ran at me, which scared the shit out of me, but it actually meant that he had tamed, so I guess that was good. Back at home, I made a fabricated sniper as well as a fabricated shotgun and then a bunch of ammo for both. I then switched up on the day ones and murdered Mordecai, which I now regret because we'll see later. But yeah, I murdered him to get his death essence because the next thing I want to tame is an Oasisaur. I then flew around for quite a while, but eventually we did find one. And once we did, I threw in the death essence, and started the tame. And the way it works is that you have to shoot a bunch of vultures that are flying out of the sky trying to kill your new baby tame that is in the little pond, and there's multiple waves that get harder as you go. And when I was just under halfway, the vulture started tanking multiple shotgun pumps of my primitive shotgun, and I realized I was pretty underprepared for this. And so yeah, I failed the tame first time around. And then I learned that the higher quality tame you use, the easier it is, which I actually thought would be the other way around because it tame at a lower level, but that's just not how it works. So I killed one of my breeding wyverns that I no longer needed, and it had multiple mutations. And this did make it a million times easier, as it became like the easiest tame ever. I shot like 3 vultures and it was tamed. It took literally only 1 phase. So yeah, I'm actually not even going to cut anything out of this footage just to prove how easy it was. Yeah, so as you can see, it was super easy, so I'm very sorry, Mordecai. That was my bad. And this is such a weird creature, like, it's just so slow and so big, like whose idea was this? I want to know who thought of this. And once I finally flew it all the way home, I parked it on top of like one of the big peaks, which just looked so goofy for the rest of the whole playthrough. I don't know, man. And then I fed it a bunch of pots because it was like already starving to death, but yeah. After this, I crafted 10 metal floors as well as 10 metal billboards, and then a cannon as well as a bunch of ammo for it. I then flew around until I found a funny looking rock, which was in fact a rock elemental, and then placed down the trap. I then got the rock's attention by shooting it with my sniper rifle, and boy was this guy slow. This clip is in 2 times speed as he slowly lumbered all the way over to the trap. And he didn't want to go in actually. There was a couple times where he literally just turned around and left the trap after I tamed him in there. Tamed him in there, let him in there. Eventually though, I did get him in and I was able to prove that I am smarter than a literal pile of rocks. And the beautiful part about this trap is all you have to do is aim it at his face, and because he doesn't move and we have walls protecting me from him, he just can't do anything, and you just shoot him a couple times and he's tamed. So yeah, highly recommend this pretty affordable, super simple trap. And I did have sulfur to tame him with, as we'd been killing wyverns the whole playthrough. There was a Dodicarus here that thought it could farm him though, so that was a little bit sketchy. Go get your own rocks, pal. It was a little bit of a wait, but eventually it did tame up, and we kind of just played around with him for a little bit, testing the abilities, just because I haven't had one of these since Valguero on Ark Survival evolved. So it's been a minute. Taming this elemental meant there was also only 1 more creature that I needed to tame, but I literally needed a fire wyvern for this, but I just couldn't find one. So once again, for the millionth time, it was back to the trenches. And to keep this trip super short and sweet, it went exactly the same as the other 10 times I had to do this. I fought a lot of wyverns, I ended up escaping eventually, but this time I had a level 90 and a level 100 fire wyvern egg. So back at home, because they were male-female, I was able to put them together and get the best stats of both onto one wyvern. This took quite some time, and the wyvern wasn't anything super insane, but eventually we had a wyvern that after I raised and imprinted, we would rename to Ashes. I then tamed a parasaur who we named Spotter because we would need them to find our next tame, which if you haven't guessed yet, it's going to be a phoenix. And a couple hours later, the parasaur actually started marking a spot that was just nothing. I then built this trap that was way over expensive and quite frank terrible around the spot. And then Ashes, Spotter, and I just kind of waited for a heat wave because that's all you can do at this point. And a couple hours later, I'd taken a couple trips to the obelisk for water and food and stuff, but one eventually did happen, and I totally missed with the trap because it's like a million times too short and stuff. But this is why we had a fire wyvern, and we did find a phoenix. And it was actually really easy to tame because it wasn't necessarily like fast at all, and wyverns are, so I just kind of had to follow it around breathing fire on it. Although my wyvern stamina was not the greatest. I really do think that this is one of the coolest unique tames in Ark though. This was pretty interesting. And once we got home and the heat wave was over, we kind of just flew around with it and played around because I'd never tamed one of these, which honestly made it feel super fitting that the final tame on Scorched Earth, meaning we'd tamed every single creature, was the Phoenix, one that I'd never done before. But this meant we were back to business as the last thing we had to do was take down the Alpha Manticore. But before we could do this, I had to do the most boring thing of all. I've mentioned it before, but I had to raise up my boss army. Luckily though, I only needed to raise 9 wyverns as I was going to take in 9 plus Pinky being the 10th. And when I was done, I actually really liked the color, like the bright gold and the bright red. It reminds me of a lot of Ninjago. Like specifically, it looks identical to Kai's dragon, even though he's fire, but I don't know. It was something I watched a lot as a kid, and I almost went with this pink design over here, which is just all pink, but I actually really, really liked the gold and red. And stat-wise, these guys are really powerful as they had 56 into health and 68 into melee, so these guys were absolute powerhouses. That's 1000% melee, but I'll be riding Pinky, who we've been riding this whole time, and is more into stamina, but also very, very powerful. I then built a platform at the obelisk so I could get all these wyverns actually into the boss arena. Back at home, I made a whole lot of stimulant, as well as grabbed all the tributes and head out. I then loaded up the terminal for the alpha boss fight, and kinda gave my dinosaurs a little bit of a pep speech. I felt really confident going in, but at the same time, this was the alpha Manticore, and I'd spent so much time on this island, either with all my dinosaurs or AFKing, but either way, I was just kind of glad that we got this far and glad that we've accomplished what we have, with taming everything along with a lot of dinosaurs that I'd never have. That being said, despite being scared of losing all of this progress and all of this time, we didn't come here to stop at the boss fight. We came here to take down the Manticore. So we booted up the terminal and got started. And the very first thing I did was hop right on the back of Pinky because that was the only place I'd be safe, as my own wyverns could kill me. I then whistled follow to everything, watched the Manticore kind of aura farm on us a little bit, but then I got out of our pile and whistled aggressive with my wyverns. The first thing I did was try to get away from the Manticore, that way I could let my wyverns I'd spent so much time on kind of do the bulk of the work here. And they were just kind of chasing it around, and I mean, it looked like a superhero fight. With these wyverns' insane damage stat, along with using their lightning breath, these guys were doing an insane damage output on the Manticore. And in no time at all, it looked like the Manticore had lost about a fourth of its health, and it seemed to just be running away as all my wyverns were relentlessly attacking it. And quickly it was down to about half health as it just couldn't escape the onslaught of attacks and lightning breaths that my wyverns were putting onto him. But as I looked at my wyverns, they were all at about 2/3 health, but some of them were getting pretty high torpor as we were pushing over halfway. And if some of them went to sleep, they were bound to die. Despite this though, they fought through and their damage output was absolutely insane, as you could visibly see the health bar going down whenever they'd connect with their lightning breaths. The Manticore did have some tricks up its sleeve though, as it spawned a bunch of rock elementals and kind of distracted my wyverns onto it, as they were just unaggressive. I did notice though, so I went down there and whistled passive as well as whistle attack this specific target onto the Manticore himself, before getting out of there and watching them wreak havoc once more. And soon enough, our relentless aggression was too much for the Manticore to handle, as he got himself trapped in a corner, and our wyverns were able to finish the job and defeat the Alpha Manticore. And not only did they defeat him, they put him in the most devastating position ever, just absolutely demoralized the guy in his death. Just straight up put him in doggy style. I mean, let's say it how it is. But guys, that marked the end of Scorched Earth. I mean, we'd done everything there was to do. And honestly, this was kind of bittersweet because I was enjoying my time on the Scorched Earth. I wasn't expecting to like it this much, but I was extremely pleasantly surprised as everything just kind of seemed to work out right. Like, as you can see, the Jerboa from day one is on my back, survived. Like, I enjoyed my time here greatly. And if you're still here, I have to ask, like, subscribe, comment whatever you're eating right now. Nobody watches YouTube without eating or going to bed. But, I mean, yeah, that's gonna do it for this one.